Hello and welcome to the HSE Half Hour. My name is Lauren. I'm the Head of Client Engagement at E&G. Myself, my colleague Laura are going to be bringing you a half-hour live show every month on all things recruitment and safety. So thank you for joining us. Laura, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. Hopefully you guys know me because I think we're on episode 19 now, Lauren, which is terrifying how many we've done. So, but yeah, hopefully you know me, but I'm Laura Orcott. I'm Associate Director for HSE Recruitment. What that means is I spent 14 years recruiting health, safety, environmental professionals, and I've got a fantastic team that do all the day-to-day recruitment, and I do all of this front-facing stuff. So I get to come out, talk to lots of lovely people, speak at different events, learn about the industry, and try and give back, try and make safety and recruitment better. That's the idea.
Nice. I love that you got the purpose in there.
Purpose, the company purpose, always.
So within my role at E&G, I work closely with Laura and the safety team, looking at research, creating white papers on safety industry trends, relevant information for our client base. And myself and Laura, we got together 19 months ago. That's absolutely crazy. Wanted to share some of this info and of course have some wonderful guests on, so I'll get to Sarah very shortly. So as always, this is a live show. Please do get involved, send your comments in and I will get to them as soon as the conversation allows. So yes, we have a very special guest this month, the lovely Sarah Piddington. Welcome, Sarah. So Sarah is a wellbeing, health, safety and leadership specialist for Safe and Well Together. So Sarah, thank you firstly for joining us today. Before we kick off in today's show, please could you give us an overview of yourself and your background and what you do?
Sure. Firstly, thanks to Laura and Lauren for inviting me along. Anyone who's met me more than once knows I like a chat.
Yeah, that's very true.
So background, I grew up in Sydney, Australia, moved to London in 2002 and began my very unexpected professional transformation as I discovered my calling in health and safety, a role I never would have sought, but unexpectedly aligned with my core values because I have a real purpose of wanting to make a positive impact in people's lives. So I set up Safe and Well Together in 2011 as I wanted to work with organisations that really wanted to address safety as well as health and wellbeing, not just tackling the safety parts. And I believe that wellbeing impacts health and health impacts safety. So it's a real tripartite arrangement where one affects the other. It's a bit of a flywheel. Yeah. So through my work, I realised that caring for people's wellbeing extends far beyond physical safety. It encompasses mental health, informed by psychology and the intricate workings of the human brain through neuroscience. And I recognised the gap in leadership, so I interwoven leadership into my practice, and it's very much about having a holistic approach that intertwines and recognises how leaders can have a profound impact on their organisation and cultivate happy, resilient teams that drive organisational success. And it's really important to me that health, safety and wellbeing are not slogans, that they're lived experiences. So 22 years later, still in a field I love.
You can see the passion there, can't you? Yeah, it's obviously something you're so engaged with. Yeah, it's great to see.
Definitely.
It definitely is. So for the second, for this instalment today, is it our third of the year, Laura, I want to say?
I think it's third of the year. Yeah, March. Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. So we're going to be discussing the topic of leadership. So an absolutely huge topic to cover in 30 minutes. We say this each month, but
we do.
Some chunky topics to run through. So over to you guys.
Yeah, so the reason we thought we'd talk about leadership this session is we have a networking group called HSE Leaders Connect. I know Sarah's been involved in it for probably the last 7-8 years or so, and that's a senior leadership networking group. And what we do is we put on seminars, roundtables, networking events where heads of and directors can kind of come together and share best practice and learn from each other. So we've been doing that since 2016, and as part of that, we recently held a roundtable for the members of that group. So that roundtable was leadership, the good, the bad, the ugly. We've actually run the roundtable twice because it was so popular. We had too many people trying to get involved in it. So we ran it once at the end of last year, once at the start of this year. With one of our partners, we partnered with a guy called Simon Brentnell. He's a self-employed safety director. He's currently a safety director for the British Frozen Food Federation. So he came along, did this kind of overview of his experience of leadership, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then the rest of us all kind of got involved and gave our experiences and kind of tried to come up with some action points off the back of it. And it was such an interesting session. I wanted to open it out to people that aren't in the HSE leaders community, so that's why I thought we'd bring it to the HSE Half Hour. I'm not going to give away everything that Simon talked about in the event because that's obviously his intellectual property. But one of the things that really stood out for me is when he was talking about the ugly. He used an example which was quite an out of the box example, which was about the bystander effect. So I don't know if many people know about the bystander effect, but there was an incident that happened a number of years ago where unfortunately a lady was murdered. There were 36, I believe it was. Someone could correct me if that number is incorrect, but there were a number of bystanders, people that heard this happening, that saw it happening from their windows, and nobody called 911 because it was in America. And this kind of coins this term, the bystander effect, which is that when there are that many people, sometimes no one takes accountability for things. So Simon was using this, as an example of where leadership can go really, really wrong, where, you haven't given any sort of accountability. No one really knows whose responsibility it is. Everyone might see things happening and know that things are happening wrong, but won't do anything about it, which I thought was quite an interesting example. Like I said, I won't give too much away about the rest of it. But what about you, Sarah? I mean, we'll start with the ugly because that's sometimes the more interesting ones. But have you come across any of these really ugly leadership situations in your career?
Yeah, more than one or two. A particular one comes to mind. I've done a lot of work in construction and property, and the amount of organisations that put targets over safety, and what that actually does. What's the corner that gets cut? If you make people do 2 jobs in an hour instead of 1 job in an hour, not setting up the safety equipment might easily be the thing that gets cut. And that safety mechanism being cut happens quite a lot. And it's so I had a construction client where a really fatigued contractor had an accident. It was clear he was fatigued. He was on the wrong piece of kit because they had taken the piece of kit away that he was working on, and he ended up on a ladder. He should have been on a scaff tower, and he fell off the ladder and he snapped both of his wrists.
Wow.
And they blamed him. And when I was sitting with the directors, I was like, hey, the injured person is this domino G. The decision you guys made in the boardroom 18 months ago to appoint the cheapest contractor was domino A. And actually this responsibility lies with you guys. Blaming the injured person is just poor form, and they wondered why they had severe underreporting. And if people don't feel safe because there's a blame culture, it doesn't serve anyone. Yeah. And I've got to say I've seen that multiple times.
Yeah, I bet.
On the right side, there's less of that because health and safety's become a bit less of tick and flick when it comes to doing paperwork. It's a bit more of a lived experience for people. But the amount of times I've seen companies choose the cheapest contractor, and then you go, well, hang on a second, that contractor doesn't have the same culture that we have. And then the managers go and blame the person who was injured. Like that guy didn't turn up on site that morning with the intent of injuring himself. So we have to seek to understand and ask questions why instead of just applying blame. Yeah. Having companies now go, oh, let's look at this just and fair culture idea. That's where the change lies that's needed in so many of these companies.
Yeah, the blame thing's really interesting, actually, because I actually had a conversation in the office this morning about this. So we're obviously the HSE recruitment. We're part of a bigger company, Executive Network Group. So we have a couple of other recruitment companies that work in the same office. And we were talking about an incident that was in the news where someone got injured, and that was the first thing that came up. Everyone was like, "Well, yeah, but he's probably done something wrong, hasn't he? He's." And I was like, "Whoa, that's not at all how this works." And I had to educate them. And there is, I think, a real misconception, probably outside of the safety industry, of where blame lies and whose responsibility it is. So yeah, really interesting examples.
Yeah. And
totally.
Some things are an error and some are violations. Like if you're intentionally cutting a corner because you want to get stuff done now so you can get home early, that might be an educated person making a stupid decision in the moment. Or it might be an educated person who momentarily loses concentration and injures themselves. Like there's a different way of treating those two instances and different training and recovery processes from that. So treating everyone the same after an incident doesn't really work. You've got to ask questions and find out the why.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's so then tied into the leadership culture, isn't it? Of whether people feel safe coming forward with that stuff, if they feel like they're going to get blamed if they say something wrong. So yeah, I've seen it myself.
Yeah, definitely. So we started there with the ugly, always something a little bit controversial. So let's switch to the opposite side now. What about the good? Could you give us an example where you've seen something where you thought that was exceptional leadership and they deserve, a round of applause?
So to me, true leadership is about exerting influence through inspiration. A lot of health and safety people look at it as authority instead of influence. Like if you can capture people's hearts and minds and enroll people in what you're trying to do, that cultivates a deeper understanding and it encourages people to foster a culture of inquiry rather than assumptions. Yeah. So I had an exceptional leader I encountered. He asked incisive questions that guided towards insights, and he embodied a real coaching mentality. And I was on a construction site with him one day and we walked past and there was a guy on the top rung of a ladder. A lot of health and safety people I have worked with would be like, "Get off that ladder now." Hey, come down from that ladder. Have a chat with me. How come you're on that piece of equipment? How come, and he was asking questions. He was seeking to understand. So his approach was grounded in empowering his team members to discover, "Oh, that's why I'm on this. Okay, in that case, I should have actually spoken up," but they didn't feel psychologically safe to speak up. And him encouraging them to discover their own answers. He said, "Hey, I'm not going to do the risk assessment for you. You're the one doing the piece of work. You tell me what your risks are." Right, and I found that inspirational because it gave those individuals ownership. And it amplified their growth. But our collective mission was, let's try not to kill anyone today.
Yes, good mission. Yeah.
It put them in the driver's seat of that. And his dedication to creating an environment where honesty was the norm and fear of failure was absent, it didn't just alter the culture, it transformed the very culture of that organization, and it led to a positive impact that extended well beyond the workplace. It actually changed people, and I see him still for drinks, funnily enough, about every 6 months, and I always blow sunshine up his butt saying, keep in nature. It's important that you keep coaching people, because coaching and mentoring and guiding people, giving them their own reasons to do things the safe way to protect their health, that's what engenders change, not risk assessments and method statements and tick and flick.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you said you set your company up in 2011. So yes, you've been in the industry a while. I've been here for 14, 15 years now. And I think I've definitely seen a change in the sort of health and safety professionals that we deal with from that old school. I like you called them the chicken flick, into this more engaging kind. So do you feel like we are on the right path now? That's the way people are going, or are there still old school around?
Do you want my diplomatic answer or my honest one?
The honest one, please.
When I started health and safety in early 2002, I would walk into an IOSH conference, and granted, I'm a 6-foot female blonde, but it wasn't just that I stood out in terms of physicality and my gender, I stood out in terms of my approach and listening to people and thinking, wow, this is a lot of compliance. This is a lot of talking about the law. I have had to quote the law maybe 3 times in 21, 22 years.
Wow.
And I see more people now coming through into a chosen career of health and safety. I never would have selected it. I got bullied by a recruitment agent to go to an interview.
That wasn't me, by the way.
That was not you. And it's the best thing I could have done, because she said, and it was Citigroup back in 2002, and she said they don't want the normal stereotypical health and safety person. They want something that's a bit different. And I could see more people like me with the emotional intelligence that can lead people. I see more people now in my industry than I ever have before, and it really gives me hope.
Yeah, I agree, because like I said, I've been doing this 14 years, and a little bit of the same. When I first started going out to these conferences and things, it was very compliance driven. It was very dry, I would say. and that's absolutely not the case now. I know a lot of the events we get involved with, we're involved with the HSE Global Series stuff that's coming up at the moment. And that's so the opposite of that death by PowerPoint. That is about engagement and peer-to-peer learning and all that sort of stuff, which I think is really, really interesting. You touched on it slightly there in your good leadership example, but that psychological safety, that I know I'm hearing so much about this at the moment. It seems to be kind of the buzzword at the minute, but how important do you think that is, that psychological safety, to leadership culture?
Imperative. It's funny that it's something that people are only picking up now. Like, I've been rabbiting on about wellbeing and mental health for 22 years, and now since the pandemic, people are going, oh, wellbeing. And psychological safety is the same thing. It's about feeling safe and comfortable to express yourself without fear of those negative consequences, whether that be being punished through, losing a bonus. If you've said, I don't feel safe doing this, I'm not doing for the rest of the day, well, we're taking your pay off you. You don't want to be punished or rejected or ridiculed for saying something. So in the context of health and safety, it's imperative. In a psychologically safe environment, people will feel free to voice their opinions. They'll bring a problem to me before it becomes a problem. They'll go, hey, I've got an unpopular opinion to raise, Sarah. I don't know what I should do about this. I don't want to raise it with my boss. Can you help me? That person didn't feel psychologically safe to raise it through their own channels.
Yeah.
So knowing that you'll be heard and respected, even if you are challenging the status quo, psychological safety is so important in so many settings, like relationships, schools, workplaces, community.
Yeah, true.
Everything. And if you don't have it, it breaks down trust. And trust is such an important thing with people in health and safety leadership. If people don't know, like, and trust us, they're not going to bring us problems, but we'll deal with it on the back end once there's been an incident.
Yeah. The interesting thing there, I think, as well, is how much of this stuff just applies to leadership in general, right? This isn't specifically straight to safety leadership.
Not at all.
Like you said, psychological safety and having that culture where you feel you can address stuff, that's outside of safety risks. That's about everything, isn't it, in the workplace?
100%. So I have this thing, I do a lot of leadership development facilitation, and I say to people on the first day, we're going to have a conversation about ugly babies. So when my best friend was pregnant, she said, everyone always says the baby's gorgeous, even if the baby's not. And I said to her, I promise you, if it's an ugly baby, we'll have an ugly babies conversation. So we both laughed about it. So I start off my workshops and I say, if we need to have ugly babies conversations, come and have them with me. You can have a conversation with me about an ugly baby. Let's just do that. And that's how I describe psychological safety. So literally, I have people now come back for their second or third workshops, and they'll put their hand up and go, Sarah, ugly baby? I'm like,
I absolutely love that. It's so catchy, isn't it? Yeah. People. We said before, before we went live here when we were chatting about how powerful storytelling is, and that's that, isn't it? It's giving someone something to catch on to and hang on to. I love ugly babies.
Yeah, there you go. Ugly babies.
I think that will be a definite catchphrase in our office now. I know that we just spoke, of course, around psychological safety and overall leadership, but something that doesn't just apply to safety and all sectors and disciplines. What do you guys think about personality profiling? I know that this has been mentioned many times before. You know, how do you both feel about these?
So it's interesting because, it does come up all the time. This came up in the roundtable. Again, when we were talking about leadership, it was a big thing. I actually don't know Sarah's opinion, so I'm interested to see where we both come in on this. I was very skeptical of personality profiles to start with. I've got to be honest, very, very skeptical. I remember when we had someone looking after sort of leadership and development within our own company, and they were trying to bring them in. I was like, no, they're nonsense. I don't need that. That's nothing. But do you know what? I think my opinion has changed slightly over time. I think if they're used in the right way, they can be really, really helpful. But I think that's where they go wrong. I think people use them in the wrong way. They don't understand the importance of them and how to relate it to what's happening in the workplace. So, we get a lot of companies that will say, well, when we get to final interview stage, we've got to have a personality profile. And you're like, okay, why? What do you want to do with that? Is that just to say, oh, they come off as too aggressive or they're too forward? That's not what you want. Or are you actually going to use that for your interview process? What do you think, Sarah?
So there's an indicator, but people. So when I've done a lot of work in policing and transport, and they tend to use DISC or insights with a red, yellow, blue, green. And just because someone's a red doesn't mean they won't sit down and have a conversation with you. What it does is show us how that person might like to be communicated with. So if I'm a big old red, someone might come to me and go, oh, that's scary. I'm not going to talk to Sarah. I'll go and talk to a green about it. That person will have empathy. That's not the way it works. It's an indicator to show how that person's likely to communicate. So if a red comes up to me and they are bright, bold and gone, I know they're not being rude. I recognize that's how they communicate and they have a different style than me. I can be super extroverted, shocking. I can also be really quiet and calm and I have a long, in-depth conversation with someone. And, Myers-Briggs, there's 16 categories of it. And we don't want to be pigeonholed into a corner to say I'm this, therefore that's how I behave. Like our emotional intelligence and our self-awareness develops as we work longer and certainly as we're leaders. And we need to give people the space to grow into what they can be. I mean, I'm slightly different than I was 5 years ago on Myers-Briggs. I'm significantly different from 20 years ago. So we change. And I had a guy last week who told me that they had their red, yellow, blue, greens laminated and stuck on the edge of their desks. I went,
oh, really? So they're absolutely, they are stuck with it. You are red and you're red for it.
It sends the wrong message because it stops people from having a conversation with that individual if they're red, or the red might go, oh, they're green. I don't have an hour to talk about this. Or they're blue. I don't want a 5,000-page spreadsheet. And it pigeonholes people, which doesn't necessarily serve us when it's an indicator. And I don't think it brings the soft skills into account enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're very much on the same or similar pages there in our opinion of them. I mean, I'm doing a leadership qualification at the moment, and even during that we did some personality stuff at the very start. I'm about 8 months through, and then we did them again recently, and even just in those 8 months things have changed, which I was quite surprised at, because my previous opinion was that I'm a big old red, and that's where I am. And actually that changed quite a lot. But one of the things I do quite like with them is if you use them in the right way and you can use them self-reflectively, I think they're quite helpful. Like I looked at that and I saw, okay, I am recognizing that I am very forward in the way I do things. I'm quite blunt. I'm to the point. But that I'm trying to use that to encourage me to work on my other skills, to build those areas. And like you said, rather than just be pigeonholed into it and like, that's the way I communicate and that's the end of the story. And I think, that's what we try to do internally here. We have quite a flat leadership structure, because we took away the idea of you just have a manager that has to be really, really good at everything. And we've had people kind of play to their strengths a bit more, but again, giving them room to grow into those different areas and build on different things, which I think it's been quite successful, hopefully.
Yeah. I agree. I definitely agree. What do you think about personality profiling when hiring? So not just from like a leadership perspective, when you're hiring into your teams, to use that within the interview process. Do you agree, disagree? It should be part of it?
So I'm not against it, but again, if people are using it in the right way, if they're just using it to say, I just want to know what they are, and it's okay, well, I feel like I need a green in this role and they're a red, therefore they're out, that's not the right way to use it. But if you're using it in the way of, okay, so before the interview, these are the areas that they're stronger on, these are the areas that they maybe need some more development, you can then ask them questions around the development areas, and you can pull out different answers, and I think it gives you then insight into who they are as a person. But I would never suggest that you use them as a yes or no tool for a role. Would you agree, Sarah?
Yeah, definitely. It's a single dimension to an individual.
Yeah.
That person could have wavered over 2 questions, and it could have changed them from one category to another.
Yeah.
Where it is helpful is if you've got a big old group of reds and you realise that there's you need someone in the team who will be willing to delve deeper. You might go, I've got reds, I really, really need a blue. I need someone who's detailed and analytical. It could be good to go, okay, I need to fill that gap. I see there's a gap, because otherwise the risk is you end up in an echo chamber where everyone agrees with everyone.
Yeah.
And I've been on a non-executive director board before, and I'm like, wow, this is an echo chamber. I'm the only person in here saying something different. Well, they were all big old reds and blues, and I'm yellow followed with red. So it can be an interesting facet.
Yeah.
But to make it a yes/no decision would be a huge mistake.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Yeah. I thought we would be, but you never know.
No clashes there. So I think from what I've personally taken from today's session, learn all about leadership, which has been great, thank you both, has been very much around the base of communication, the storytelling and the open questioning, not assumptions, not get down off that ladder, for example, which I like, but to understand why people are doing things and getting the why out of them to come to the best conclusion. I think that everyone says communication's key, but it's actually the underlying, how do we get to that answer? Not just, yes, I can talk well, but it's about listening and asking the right questions to get to that. So yeah, that's something that I've definitely taken away.
Communication and ugly babies.
And ugly babies.
Ugly babies, yeah, definitely. I think the fact that most of my sister, a lot of my friends are pregnant at the moment, I don't think I'll raise the conversation with them. But something I can definitely talk about in the office. That's hilarious.
I didn't plan on raising that. Just came out.
That should be the little clip for this episode.
Yeah, just the ugly babies. That's the hashtag.
Sorted. Yeah. So I think that brings us nearly to the end of the session. So
half blue as always.
It really does. So thank you, so much, Sarah, for joining us today, enlightening us with your leadership examples, good, bad, ugly. We love to see, and the ugly babies, of course. So that absolutely flew by. Laura, what are we discussing next month?
Next month, right? So next month, kind of similar actually, because I know Sarah's touched a little bit on the well-being, and so we're focusing on mental health and well-being. It's a really important topic. I know it gets talked about a lot, but I think we're trying to focus in next month on particularly some of the more male-dominated spaces. For example, health and safety has previously been quite male-dominated, but construction. So we're having another special guest joining us next week. So we're having a gentleman come and join us who is from a construction background, and he's going to come on and talk about his experience with mental health, addiction, how that kind of plays into those sorts of workspaces, and how he's using that experience now to give back to the industry. So I think it should be a really interesting one. Hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Love having special guests. And again, a massive thank you to Sarah. If you would like to send Sarah any comments, any questions, please do so. Connect with her on LinkedIn. Not to throw her under the bush, she has agreed to that before. I know that we've had some technical difficulties today with the comments. So if there's anything for any of us, please do reach out via message and we can go from there. And yeah, we'll
see you next month.
Yeah, see you next month. And thanks again.
I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Right, thank you, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.